Welcome. I'm J. Michael Silver, and this is Foundational Steps, the show where I talk with people about the choices they've made to get where they are in life now. In this episode, I'm talking with Ashley Allen, professional dancer, dance teacher, nine-figure corporate marketing expert, and mother of three. We get into some pretty heavy territory on this one. If you want to go deep with some real talk, don't miss this episode. Links for Ashley and timestamps for everything that came up while we talked are in the show notes. Please support the show by leaving a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and check out our affiliate links for cool things you might find valuable. Enjoy our conversation. Welcome to the show, Ashley. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
So just give us a quick define yourself in like a minute or less. Like, who are you in this moment in time?
In this moment in time, I think the first word to describe myself is mother. I never thought I'd be in a space where that was the first word that I said described myself, but I have three wonderful kids, a 7-year-old boy, 2-year-old girl, and 1-year-old girl. So mother first. Business professional, director, head of marketing for a company. So have my own career in the marketing space, and I have really thrived and been successful in that. A friend. It's funny, the older I get now, my friend group is much smaller, but adore and love and have really deep and meaningful relationships with those people. I still like to have fun. I still like to explore. Not as much as I used to do, but I still enjoy doing it. I think always curious. I'm curious to learn about other people's perspectives, cultures, ideologies. So definitely still have a curiosity, and probably one of the things that Scott, and I bonded over very early was our ability to connect and talk and just go down very, very deep rabbit holes of curiosity based on very silly subjects. So
Awesome.
That's a little about me.
And for anyone who's listening, Scott's episode will have already come out by the time you're hearing this, so you can go back and listen to Scott Farr's episode. I don't know what number it's going to be at this point in time. Awesome. So okay, so let's kind of this. I imagine this could be the beginning of motherhood, or this could be when you were a child. But when was the first moment you realized you were, in this body making decisions that affected the reality around you? And I know that probably changed, and you probably had multiple moments, but like, when was the first, real memory that that the choices you made actually impacted your reality?
Young. I had a more traumatic childhood than I care to admit. My parents went through a divorce when I was very young. I was 6, I think, when they finally divorced, and 4-year trial.
Oh, wow.
My mom
That's
so
brutal.
it was messy, and then some not so great stepfather figures within that the next couple of years. So I think just by nature of who my mom was, and I think she did the best for what she was emotionally capable of. But I had to really grow up a lot younger than most. And so the idea probably came when I was in elementary school of this action or this thing affects what's going on. And it could have been as simple as, if I want to eat, and I mean that, my mom's not going to make dinner tonight.
Yeah.
So I'm going to figure it out. Or,
She's busy.
she just wasn't able to. And as a single mother and doing, like I said, I do believe wholeheartedly she did the best she could. And I can't imagine that. I've always had a partner to help support with our children. But it was definitely early on. And I think as you grow naturally, the variations and the extent of which that goes and how much those decisions alter your reality grow as you get a better understanding outside of just yourself and what goes on in the world as a whole. But
yeah, for sure. And what are some of the other points and times? I want to revisit probably early childhood in a general way, or as specific as you want to be. But what are some of the other moments then throughout time that kind of where it deepened your understanding of of how your decisions and how your choices, affected your reality?
I think the next iteration of it was probably once I got to high school was the next layer of it. My mom had gone through at that point her second divorce, or was in
Mm,
the process of going through her second divorce. And very much reliant on men and finances and what that looked like. And so I knew very young, I got a job when I was legally able to at
yeah.
15,
Yep.
started working, and was very aware that I wanted to be able to make sure that I was able to financially provide for myself. At the very least, at that point, that was it. It was like, hey, if I want X, I cannot rely on anyone else. And I've
Hmm.
seen how what's going on around me allows for just, circumstance to determine what it is. And I wanted to make my own circumstance. So that was definitely a defining moment, I think, in high school, where I've really held on to that, for better or worse at times. I think you could probably say and
Yeah.
and argue both sides of it. But that in high school was definitely a really defining moment of understanding that I wanted to create my own financial stability. I think came back later in life. The next was college. And I think I learned, as a coping mechanism, is something that I've always enjoyed throughout my youth, was dance. It was my
Mm,
escapism from reality, whatever the reality was, whether it was, friendships or school or my family. Dance was something that for me just allowed me to be in a different world, be a different person, just, and physically, just all the physicality that came with it.
yep.
I really enjoyed it. And so I got to a point where I realized that I could pursue dance on a professional level, and did a collegiate dance team, moved to an NBA dance team, and then from there continued on. So just realizing that I could actually make money off of a passion was pretty cool.
So you got paid for dancing for an NBA team?
Very little,
Yeah, I
very
didn't
little at that
didn't think
point.
there was much money in that.
No, but
Yeah.
I used it as a stepping stone to start to book industry work.
Mm,
So for me, it was able to network and utilize the contacts who were around me. And I think you could have done it in a lot of different ways. I had friends that were lawyers and teachers and different things that were actually able to utilize contacts there to elevate careers that
it's
had nothing to
fantastic.
do with the dance world. But for me at the time, I was young enough to be able to be like, well, yeah, sure, let's pursue dance. Why not?
Yeah, yeah, you got the freedom and you
Yeah,
don't
and,
need as
and
much money.
started booking enough work where being on an NBA team actually cost me money. And so when I decided
Mm.
to leave, it was that pivotal point of, all right, this is not, I need to do the next variation. This is done.
Not to, I don't want to get into the politics really,
Mhm.
but I just want to touch it for a second. Do you think there's a reality, and maybe obviously it's something that people like yourself would have to fight for, having gone
Mhm.
through it, but do you think there's a reality where a dancer could make a living working for an NBA team like that and being, I mean, because essentially you're doing marketing and advertising as a dancer. I
I
mean, it's a
think,
lot of
yeah,
PR.
you have to be strategic about what you see when you go in it and what your end goal is. And I think that who they are targeting, generally speaking, is a younger demographic of women.
Hmm.
And so as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old girl, you are not, or I didn't, at least, maybe others did, have the complete insight of, okay, this is or understanding for that matter, of the political game as a whole that is
Yeah.
the NBA that you have just now gotten sucked into and are a part of.
And it's a
And how do
billion
I,
dollar industry. So
yeah, how
it's
do I, as a female in this that is really and truly, I mean, not looked at, not that they didn't respect us, or, but to certain degrees, I'm not said NBA player who's making millions. So just by
right.
nature, I'm not going to get the same level of buy-in that LeBron
Sure.
James is going to get. It's just the harsh reality of it.
Sure.
So I think it's really hard for someone that young to have the wherewithal to say, okay, this is what I want to get out of this industry. I think you could definitely turn it into a career,
Hmm.
but to financially sustain that business model, unless they have changed it dramatically since I have been on that team, there is
Right.
no possible way to sustain a life without a sponsor or another job?
So, and this is kind of what I wanted to get to. So,
Uh-huh.
at what point in time did you realize that, or how was that conveyed to you so that you were able to figure out? Because I'm sure not all of the dancers figure this out, and I'm sure some of them, either burn out or have other issues.
Mm-hmm.
So you're, I think, would be a success story in that situation. So how did you become a success story and figure it out and whatnot?
I think it goes back to that earlier drive that I was talking about, where I realized that I wanted to be financially sustained. And that came from myself. It didn't come from other people. I think that
Right.
if you are, and there's not a knock to this, I think it's just a reality that if you are a person, and that sponsor could have been your parents. So I don't say this in a way where it's
Yeah.
derogatory of like, your sponsor has to be a sugar daddy, although that did very well happen quite a bit. But I never wanted my source of income to come from somebody else. And I
Yeah.
got to a point very quickly where now at 21, I had all the energy in the world. So I think I worked like 3 jobs at the time, and I was bartending, teaching dance classes, and then doing this, and then going to school full time.
Hmm.
And so it just got to a point where I looked at the hours that I was working and thought, this isn't it anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm making X amount more booking jobs that are for an artist or for, something that is SAG after, or just
Hmm.
started learning in and outs of the industry. But I think that for me personally just came from my background and something that I decided very young, which was, I'm going to do this on my own, and I'm going to make sure I can sustain on my own. And although I appreciate what the NBA and being an NBA dancer gave to me, there was a point where I outgrew it.
Yeah.
And what their expectations were didn't help support what my needs and wants in life were.
Was
And so,
there any resistance for you moving on?
yeah, of course. I think you just get to a point where it's your identity.
Yeah.
You spend so much time there and you get stuff from it. Like, that'd be disingenuous for me to be like, oh yeah, I danced for the Heat at their prime when we got LeBron, Bosh, and Wade. I
Yeah.
didn't get anything from that. But there was this title, and it becomes your identity, and people know you and associate you as the NBA dancer.
Hmm.
And so I think for a lot of women that come off of these teams, it's okay, well, who am I without this title that grants,
Hmm.
just for whatever it is, people associate it as something like a shiny object. It's, something to aspire to, even if
Yeah.
you're making pennies on it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You're around this whole different lifestyle. And so I think it became easier for me to be distracted by it, because when I left, I booked a tour. And so I essentially moved from one shiny object to the other.
Right.
And so my identity didn't change so drastically where I wasn't in that world anymore,
Hmm.
but it still was scary. It still was like, there's this level of unknown. I think anytime
Yeah.
we experience change, it's like, oh
It's a new
gosh.
job. I mean, there, you know, there's something, not a lot of people, unless you're an entrepreneur, meaning that you're starting a bunch of stuff, stopping stuff,
Mhm.
things work, don't work, or you're a serial job jumper. I don't think most people understand what it's like. And, I've met people, and coach people who are changing careers. It's like, this is the only job I've had for 20 years. I don't know what else to do. And it's not that they can't, it's just like you said, it's the identity.
Mhm.
And, if I'm one of the big takeaways, I think, from what I'm hearing for you, especially around the dance, is that you had a vision of not being beholden to anyone. You didn't want anyone, pulling the strings. So you made it a point to look at what my options are. What are other
Mhm.
people doing? And constantly surveyed your circumstances for opportunity and for options. And I think that is a massive, massive credit to you, having a vision and then looking to how to fulfill that, where most people, and I'm
Yeah.
curious if you've, with some of the other dancers, I mean, did you see a lot of people not doing that?
There was definitely a variety of humans, and I
Mhm.
think that that's kind of, it's a very interesting space to be in. I think for me too, I also had a necessity to look other spaces out of survival. Like I
Yeah.
didn't have a sponsor, I didn't have my, I mean, whether it was my family or somebody else, I was on
Right.
my own. And so for me, it was in some ways out of necessity that I was like, well, if I want my next meal and I don't want to have to worry about my next meal or
Yeah.
my roof over my head, like I this isn't it. But to look at other people, there were definitely those that, I mean, a long time that they were doing it, and I in some ways did never knew how or never knew why or understood it. And then I think for others, um just by nature you start to be like, okay, am I like, there's also, I think, a socially acceptable, like, am I socially acceptable to still be 30? And it sounds silly because I'm in my 30s now and I'm like, oh, that's super young. But at the, you know, when you're
Yeah.
21, you're like, 30 is ancient. This is,
Yeah.
you might as well be dead at
Perspective
that
is,
point.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely, I think, just by necessity, people are, you know, whatever peer pressure that was culture, and kind of decided, all right, well, I'm going to go off. And then there was those, my daughter's godmother, still great friends with her. She was getting her bar, like she was going through all of that when she was on the heat. And I've never seen a woman work so hard. And it was
Wow.
purely a passion to be able to do, and kind of her last hurrah before she started on her journey. She's now a partner at her law firm.
Hmm.
And so it's just, there's all kinds of iterations. I know it's a very unique thing to see a bunch of different personalities all brought together over this passion project that is dance. Some were not there for that, but a lot of us, the vast majority, were there for that reason.
So I mean, your ability to kind of pave your own path, or
Mhm.
blaze your own trail, or like that seems to kind of come out of that early awareness that your decisions are dictating your life and create your reality. So, how did that um like how did that affect your way, how did that affect the way you looked at your history and where you came from, and then how did that affect like how you saw your future and where you were going? Did it give you stability? Did it make you uneasy? Like how did that kind of manifest in your kind of mental speak, your
I think
self-talk?
later or earlier stages, it definitely, as much as I wanted to take the lesson and learn stability or apply stability, I think
Hmm.
just by nature of being brought up in a very unstable environment, chaos felt comfortable to me. And it
Yeah.
felt like something that I knew it. I knew chaos. I knew whatever that was. So I think whether it was, you know, something I knew I was doing or had no understanding that I was doing it, there was always a draw to chaos. And I think probably at
Hmm.
times, I mean, I think to be a professional dancer, to get to that level where you are doing that, there were days where it was like, all right, tomorrow we may or may not fly you, actually happened. We may or may not fly you to London for a week. After the week of rehearsals you've just had, we don't know. We're waiting on said thing. We'll let you know in the morning, 2 hours before your flight leaves. So you're just like, okay. And you get to this point where it's, I mean, that is chaotic.
Yeah.
I have anxiety and sweating thinking about that now. But at the time, I was just used to
Yeah.
chaos. So chaos just kind of was able to form in a way that seemed less chaotic,
Yeah.
even though it
Sure.
was still just
Normal.
another
It's
variation of
normalized.
it. Yeah. And so I mean, I started going to therapists at a very young age. Some was forced by my family, and others, I think I got to a point where I really wanted to embrace it. I think the
Hmm.
other harsh reality of being a professional dancer is I developed a very intense eating disorder. We were of the era where you had to be weighed in. You were placed in groups based on what your body fat percentage and weight was.
Wow.
And so you would go into
That's hardcore.
they would take pictures of you in outfits and circle your problem areas. And I mean, I look back now and I'm like, God, I'd give anything to be that size little. But at the time, I just was so, it was so normal. And it was just, and again, it was more, I think I was 10 plus years ago now, but it was socially acceptable to do that too. I
Yeah.
mean, now I look at the team that I was a part of, and it's a completely different group of women that never would have been on the court when I was there. And so, yeah, it just, like I said, I still had chaos. And so within that, I got to a point where later in life, I really chose to seek out additional help. That I realized some of these issues, just based on childhood traumas, based on an eating disorder. The one in particular, I dealt with bulimia, and so the control issues that you pull from, and it was from as a child feeling like I was out of control for so long,
Yeah.
and now trying to find these spaces where I could gain control but still keep the chaos, but no chaos. And so it was navigating that. And I think as I started to find stability and start to find, I think actually having kids was a huge layer. And not that I ever recommend to anyone having kids as a way to figure out your life, but I mean, not knowing that
But you got to be
having,
willing to do the work too,
yeah,
because that's the difference. Like having
yeah.
kids is going to just compound your issues if you're not willing to do the work to figure it out.
And it was just, it changes this perspective of, I think it there's layers of it where these moments of, it's funny, for those that don't, Scott's my partner and father to all three of our kids, so that's why you'll see me refer to him quite a bit. But he and I really made it a point to discuss what those past traumas were, and
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that our children were not raised with those past traumas. And so it's a very pivotal moment. And I remember looking at him after, and I think I said to him after our son, I was like, I feel really angry at my mother, and I don't necessarily know why. And it took more therapy to start to realize, like, how frustrated I was by choices she made as a mother that now, being in the place of a mother, I just personally would not have made. And so I know he has his own set of those. And I remember asking him, I was like, how do you feel about your mom? He's like, I'm actually really grateful. So it just speaks to the different,
Yeah.
dynamics of what you experience. And so for me,
And
I
how
mean,
you deal with it too,
yep.
because I mean, there was for me, I mean, my father and I had a contentious relationship for like 40 years, and I managed it the best I could until I finally I was like, I'm tired. I'm sick of managing it. I'm done. I'm not talking to you anymore.
Mhm.
Like that was the only thing I knew how to do, because I couldn't manage it anymore. He wasn't going to change. And until I figured out how I no longer had to manage it, and I could
Mhm.
just let him be the person he's always been and always will be, because he has no interest in changing. After 40 years, that's abundantly clear. So I finally had to cut him off so that I could learn how to not be triggered and not need to manage the
Mhm.
relationship, manage him, manage myself with him. And now it took 2 years, but now, like, he and I have a great relationship, and I can say that I'm grateful for all the things that made me want to kill him or kill
Yeah.
other people or kill myself, you know.
I went through a very similar situation with my father, actually, where we stopped speaking for a couple of years, and it is, and we have a great relationship now. And it was that understanding of our differences. And I think the biggest thing with him in particular was, to his level and to his layer, he was really able to own, I'm sorry for whatever I did. And
Yeah.
it was heartfelt. And I think there was a point where before, I don't know if you experienced this, where that version of heartfelt for him would not have been received by me because I didn't understand or wasn't willing to accept those.
I didn't. I actually got to a point where I just am like, I'm done,
Mhm.
and I basically killed him,
Mhm.
metaphorically,
Yeah.
in I mourned his death for 2 years,
Mhm.
and then and then it was kind of like rediscovering, oh, I've got this person. He's going to
Mhm.
fill in for the father I never had,
Yep.
or whatever. Um, and he's got his issues, but I don't, if my father ever apologized, I don't remember it, because it's really not in his nature. It's
Yeah.
like, because he's never wrong.
Yes.
And if he is wrong, he'll tell you it because someone else told him he was wrong. Doesn't matter if you told him wrong. Doesn't matter if you proved that he was wrong. Someone else on the
Uh-huh.
outside mention something, and he's like, oh yeah, Dave said such and such. I'm like, I told you that 6 times.
But it
um,
finally was received though.
yeah. So I mean, it's a funny thing though. So okay, so this is a tough question
Mhm.
because this kind of goes into how you become who you become, the
Yep.
chaos that you went through that allowed you to deal with the dancing and the
Mhm.
times and the 3 jobs and everything else you were dealing with. Could you imagine a world in which you had none of that chaos, that you could have done what you did in those years?
Probably not.
So now,
Mhm.
having kids, trying to protect them to a certain extent
Mhm.
or prepare them for whatever kind of craziness that's outside of the home that you can't control.
Right.
How do you manage that? How do because most of the time, some of the mothers that I've talked to, this has kind of come up, but I feel like this is the first time I've really, because of your story and because of the way you're dealing with things, this is the first time that I've had an opportunity to think about how to ask this question. But like, you're preparing your kid to go into the world that's just as chaotic, maybe in different ways, but just
Mhm.
as messed up, chaotic, and full
Mhm.
of baggage and craziness. Um, maybe in different
Yeah.
ways, but it's still like, how do you prepare them to become the successful person that you've become and that you've journeyed through without going through the divorces, the turmoil, trauma, and chaos?
It's funny because I mean, I think part of it too, for me personally, I mean, there's a luck factor to this too, that I consult the, I got
I
lucky.
should have been dead 100,
Yeah,
maybe a
there's
thousand
many
times.
times where I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know about that one. Jesus was definitely sitting next to me in that
Yeah.
car because I should not have been there. But it's something that Scott and I talk about quite a bit. And when looking at parenting and some of the things that I think allowed for trauma or chaos or those different things to be what pushed us, part of the reason that I know for myself personally that I turned to those items is, or use the comfort of it. I didn't have people that I trusted that I was able to speak to
Right.
and openly and honestly, and not this. I mean, I remember my mom was very much, we were raised as, her parents were missionaries, very much raised in the church.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And so for me, it kind of created this really weird relationship for some time with the church and what that looked like, because when I'd ask her a question, like an honest question about like sex before marriage and what does that look like, it was like literally the Mean Girls, you'll get chlamydia and you'll die. And that was kind of my response. And it's like, well, that doesn't,
Cut to 3 kids and
yeah,
not
actually,
married.
yeah, I'm like, it doesn't help. And so it's like having this open and honest communication with them where, I mean, we're getting questions way younger already with our oldest than I
Yeah.
ever thought we would get. I think he came on the other day and was like, Mommy, someone told me that because I like boys, I'm gay. Like, what does that mean? It's just like, you're 6. I was not mentally prepared for this question right now. And you start to realize it's just this girl in his class has older siblings. And so she's hearing it and they're like, he's like, well, maybe I am gay. I like hanging out with my guy friends. You're
Yeah.
like, 6. Like, that's just, there's nothing wrong with it.
Well, I know for a fact if I was growing up in today's day and
Oh,
age,
it's
I would have major questions and
about
major
everything.
crises because I'm obsessive. I'm,
Yes.
on
And
that spectrum, and I would have, I don't know how I would have gotten through teenage years,
I
let
think that's
alone
been
being
the biggest
6.
thing, is just allowing for, even in those moments where it's like, man, I was not expecting that. But it's not like the conversation that my mother had. And one of the things that for me is we found a wonderful church in California when we were there, that I mean, openly, that idea of like, we accept all. It wasn't just this, word. And then
Yeah.
whenever a gay person or this person, another person came in, it was like, we'll accept them.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's,
it
I
was
think, the difference, because in my mind, thinking like I have no idea how it would have gotten through,
Yeah.
because I was super sensitive, super obsessive,
Mhm.
mentally. I was worried about everything. And I definitely, uh, I definitely would have questioned my gender.
Mhm.
I don't think I would have questioned my sexuality, but who knows?
Yeah.
But the difference is in thinking about it, at that age, it was not acceptable. And
No.
my parents, I think, would have been fine, but the rest of the world wasn't. Like all of the kids that I knew that were gay got
Oh, the
harassed
whole thing. Yeah.
mercilessly, and or the women that were, more, butch or whatever the correct
Mhm.
word is these days, like they got harassed mercilessly. Like so, like one of the things that I feel lucky is like I fit in just enough of a way
Mhm.
where people kind of made up their own stories,
Mhm.
but like I got teased and harassed for stupid things, luckily. Like
Uh-huh.
that just made me scratch my head, and why does anyone care about these things?
Yep.
Like um I can't even imagine getting harassed for who you like or who you don't like, or if you want to wear nail polish or whatever.
God, or it's a different thing. I think that's been the biggest thing that I hope we take and continue to take, is just to allow for a space where we've created a trusting relationship and we can
Yeah.
have honest conversations when they come up. Because I mean, at 6, let's be honest, he doesn't understand.
No.
Like there's no way to understand a concept that I think adults have a hard time grasping or understanding. And so now you throw in a world where there's social media on top of it. And I mean, I didn't navigate a high school with social media.
Yeah.
And it's just a whole different ball game of like what that looks like. And so I think there's a relevance where I hope that based on our backgrounds and some of the things we had access to, this culture puts such an importance and emphasis on these things like success and fame and
Identity is everything
identity.
in
Yeah,
today's world for some god awful reason. I
yes.
mean,
And so to have two people that came from those spaces and were able to say, hey, yeah, I made it as a professional dancer, but it wasn't glamorous. It was really, really hard.
yeah.
And it was really, really lonely. And when you're on tour for months at a time, try dating someone. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm going to be gone for the next 6 months, but
Yep.
maybe we can get a cup of coffee when I'm back.
Yeah.
No one had interest in you like that, or for anything serious or of depth. And so
Yeah.
my hope is that just in raising kids, we're able to have kind of a unique perspective based on our backgrounds and what we came from, and being able to be like, hey, I've been there. Like, do you
Yeah.
want to talk about it? Let's talk about it. The good, bad, the ugly.
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting thing. I mean, obviously, it's all kind of an experiment, so you won't really know
No.
how your kids are going to do
Oh
until
no,
they're doing
you
it.
throw a dart and hope that something
Yeah.
sticks with parenting.
After years of working with kids, my conclusion was your kids are going to end up fucked up no matter what, because that's the
Mhm.
human condition.
Yes.
The question is how much are you going to play into that, and how much are you going to be there for them when shit hits the fan?
Yep.
And like the one thing that my parents did for me, regardless of all the my struggles with mostly my father, but my parents in
Mhm.
general, the one thing I knew is that if I had to, I could talk to them about anything.
Yeah.
I didn't really want to talk to them about anything. By the time I was, I don't know, 13, 12, 13, I didn't want to talk to them about anything. But,
No.
and maybe that's just genetics, or maybe that's culture, maybe that's a combination of things. But I
Mhm.
knew if I had to, I knew they were there for me.
Yep.
And I think that made a difference that I saw a lot of other kids not having, because of crazy religious ideas, because of crazy um, uh, sex gender ideas, because of racist ideas, or whatever it was. Like I definitely saw the spectrum of what other families did not accept. Therefore, the kids did not have a safe place for everything. They
Right.
only had a safe place for some things.
Yep.
And that was my conclusion, is that's the probably the only thing you actually can give your kids is is the unconditional love to just be there for them.
Yep.
That was my takeaway.
Yep.
Let's backtrack all the way to that first, childhood kind of moment. You want to eat, you've got to make the decisions. How did you cope with all of that? Like, what were the mechanisms that you started developing at an early age to be able to handle the fact that, I may or may not have dinner tonight if I don't figure out how to cook something? Like, how did you deal with all of that chaos and so forth through the ages, through the years?
I still am able to compartmentalize in ways that I probably shouldn't. And to the point where I've gotten better at, I think, at least identifying it. And I really do credit Scott to a lot of it too, because there are times where he'll look at me and be like, "Hey, you just got hit with something really big, like, and you're not taking any time to just process it."
That's amazing.
Whatever those feelings are. So I think just having a partner who's able to know you and that you trust on that level to be able to have some, different perspective than your own.
Yeah.
But compartmentalization was, I think, just a big tool with it. It's funny, over the years of therapy, they're like, it's probably one of the things that has made you really successful, because you're able to compartmentalize, kind of shapeshift and be a chameleon of sorts, so you can move and do what you need to in different situations based on just a survival mechanism. So if you need to make dinner, you need to make dinner, and that's who you're going to be in that moment. And so that was definitely it. I think later in life, I mean, the bulimia was a coping mechanism that I didn't realize at the time. I thought it was just because, I needed to lose weight and make sure I never got in the fat group. When you actually look at like what that is and the control issues that it is, that was definitely a coping mechanism that was obviously very negative and very harmful. And in later life, I think learning how to, I teach yoga. So actually was at college, I had an injury from dance and I wasn't able to do as much. And so someone recommended a yoga class, and I was like, sure, this sounds fun. And I hear dancers are like halfway decent at yoga. And I fell in love with it. It was the only space I really took or learned how to take where I actually had moments of quiet for myself.
Yeah.
And
so you didn't get that until college, though?
College.
Wow. I do yoga every single morning, and if I don't do it, I can feel it through the day.
Yeah.
Like even if I only get like 10 minutes in, if I don't get it, even just a 10-minute basic, I feel it through the rest of the day.
It's amazing, the benefits of the breath work, the meditation, the quiet, that I just had never had. And I think once I got an ounce of that, I started to really realize what that was and what making space for yourself started to look like, and the different ways you could make space for yourself. It didn't, whether it was yoga or quiet time and meditation in your home or a walk or
walking is also, I think that's one of my favorites, because most people can do it. And it's something that's like, just go for a walk. No, just go for a walk.
Yep.
Like,
get outside,
just go for a walk. Just put one foot in front of the other, start walking. And if you look up and you're not sure where you are, turn around. You've gone far enough. But walk around the block at the very least. I'm just curious, I'm not sure how to ask this. So compartmentalization is not necessarily good or bad. The value of it is if you're willing to unpack whatever you put away.
Yes.
And it's super powerful to have that skill or to learn that skill, as long as you're willing to unpack. So was the yoga the first time you started to unpack?
Yeah. And like I said, I think before that I had therapy, but it was forced. It was like family therapy and things like that. Yeah. So it never was received well.
And it never became a practice. It was more of just like, okay, I'll do it right now. Okay, I'm done.
Yes. And it was just like getting through it and kind of rolling my eyes at it and like, all right, well, it is what it is. But in yoga in particular, I remember I went through a period where I didn't realize how much of my childhood, mental abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse that I had and gone through, that I remember going through, it was an hour and a half practice, and it was that the last 10 minutes of Shavasana, and I couldn't stop crying. Like
Yeah.
it was, and I didn't even
It's
know
magic.
why. I was like, what is going on? I'm just like
Yeah.
tears streaming down my face. And I came back again, and it was the same thing. And it was like every time I go in, it was just, and then it allowed for this space of like, I think I get in my car and I would just like, it started to release. And I don't think I at the time even knew what was releasing.
Hmm.
And then went at times and started actually even compartmentalizing that. Well, was like, see, I had my release. Now I don't have to deal with it anymore. And then I'd go do whatever other things to distract myself and stay
Hmm.
busy and to have the chaos that actually, was a form of that compartmentalization. So it's still something that I have to remember to unpack, I think, as a mother in particular, too.
Hmm.
You get really good at it in a different way because everything's just naturally about other people.
Right.
And so you just tend to take a back seat. And so I think it was recently I got to a point where I was working 15, 16 hours a day with my job. I was waking up at 4,
Jeez.
doing work for 2 hours. I'd get the kids ready because Scott already gone. I'd get my car, I'd drop the girls off, I'd go to work, I'd work for 8 hours, I'd leave, I'd get dinner for everybody else, and then I'd start working again. And I was like, Jesus, like I am putting out for and the times I had on the weekend, I was putting out for Scott to try to make sure our relationship was good. And it got to a point where I was like, I am not getting any space
Yeah.
for me. And to
There's
put that,
there's no scheduled time for
yeah.
just let go.
And a huge part of the shift into the role that I'm in now is like, I'm remote. I don't have to deal with the commute. I have more time and flexibility, and I
Yeah.
can go to the gym in the morning and I can take my yoga class because that for me is filling my cup and it allows for my space and my time. And
Well, you'll be better at your job too because of this. So you'll
yes,
be more productive, hands down. You're just going
yes,
to be better, you know.
yes. And it is. I mean, my kids are already there. My son was like, I like having you home. Like I
Yeah.
like having you at home. And so it's really interesting to see. And I think where before I would have felt like I had to stay in the last situation for a whole lot longer, or that it
Mm.
was normal. And I think one of the catalysts in all the different forms of whether it was meditation or therapy or different, or an accountability partner, it got to a point where I think very early on I identified that that was not a good situation. And it's like, okay, well, doesn't mean I'm going to make a drastic decision and run for the hills immediately because I have 3 kids to feed.
Right.
But when the right opportunity presented itself, it was very apparent very quickly that
Yeah.
the risk of change was not so scary anymore. The risk of it was like, well, this isn't working. So whatever's on the other side, this isn't it. And so it's interesting to see how you get to a point where the more you practice it, whether it be compartmentalization, whether it be, being able to take those moments to identify your situation, to unpack the compartmentalization, it definitely has a shorter window of
Hmm.
being able to actually take the time and recognize and make changes or shifts if I need to.
Yeah, you
And
need less time also when you do it regularly and often.
yep.
So this is another kind of I'm not sure. I mean, so bulimia, obviously, and anorexia, like any kind of eating disorder, is really rough. Is there anything that you gleaned from that experience that has made your life better?
I've over many years, and I think still to some degree struggle with it just based on like, I mean, what a woman goes through when your body changes through pregnancy is very hard. And so
Hmm.
I had really severe postpartum with my second daughter. And so there was weight gain based on the medication that I was on that triggered a lot of different things. And so I don't think it's something that ever fully goes away. I think it's something that in the back of your head, body image and what that looks like, and navigating that as a female, especially in the world we live in now, where it is in front of you 24/7 of what the
Yeah.
perfect body is
Well,
something
also the perfect body now is different. I mean, you got, but I don't think that's healthy either. Saying, and
no. It's
like
terrible.
anytime, like Lizzo is all about, let's be big chicks and
Mhm.
whatever. And I'm like, hey, great. If you want to be a big chick, that's wonderful. But that's just as bad as saying you should be a super skinny chick, because it's like, maybe we should just say, hey, do whatever
Makes
is
you
good
healthy
for
and
you.
keeps you, I mean, because Lord knows if I start going down, I mean, just from a getting older, like if I start eating like crap and have a week of it, I physically feel it now.
Yeah.
And so it's just a health choice at times where I'm like, oh, got to cut back on this. And it's
Yep.
that. And so having struggled with that, it's something that I think for me, just identifying, I read a study the other day, they were saying that girls now, and having two girls, start to have body issues or body awareness by the time they are 6 years old.
Wow.
And that a lot of that comes from the way in which their mother views their body. And so when I talk about or go back to those ideas of making changes for my kids, I mean, my mother was very much, and I think it was part of her coping mechanisms from what she dealt with as a kid, placed a lot of importance on the exterior and what you looked like and how you presented yourself and what those things are based on how you look could get you, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
She was really, really
There's a lot of men that
good.
are very easily manipulated
Yes,
for the
and
right
she
looks.
was very good at utilizing that. And so in talking about changing patterns, really making sure that like we change the verbiage that we say to our daughter. And I mean, our daughters are beautiful, and I will tell them they're beautiful, but they're also smart and they're funny and they're silly and
Yeah.
they're strong and they're all these other different adjectives. And so taking from that experience and being able to learn and be aware of the fact that like I want to make sure I model strong,
Right.
confident women that are not body obsessed, that are not, going and weighing themselves on the scale every 5 seconds to try to deem what this unobtainable perfection is.
Yeah. It's
Is
interesting what I'm hearing. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just, I'm looking for a positive, way of framing the bulimia, but it sounds like your extreme, your foray into the extreme gave you the ability, and all, it saddled you with the need to always be aware, always be mindful
Mhm.
of how you're presenting yourself, how you're talking to yourself, and how you're talking to your girls. So it could end up being, it's possible. I mean, God knows what the world's going to do to them, but it could offer an end to the cycle in your
Yeah.
family,
And
for your girls.
I think you look at it too. And when I actually dealt with the fact that I was dealing with bulimia, that was when I started going to therapy for
Mm.
me, for my choice and for
Yeah.
understanding. And there was, I mean, very specific food therapists. And I went into a pretty extensive like outpatient program specifically for bulimia. And I got to a point where for me, I didn't have to physically make myself throw up. My body was so accustomed to it that I would just
Wow.
throw up.
You're just
And
trained.
it was that severe. And so it was a lot of different types of therapy. But I think too, the I don't want to say cool, but I don't know the word for it, but like when you actually go into what that disorder is and peeling back the layers of what causes the disorder, it was the first time I really had to take a look at my past and my family and what I learned, and why I chose bulimia made a lot of sense because it was a way to control things. Where
Yep.
as a child, I was not able to control a lot of the things that were going on around me. And it in some ways gave me a sense of security. And so with opening those layers, it was like, oh, I have some like childhood stuff that I have to deal with here, and some traumas that I dealt with. Like I said, some abuse that I had to really go in and start to peel back. Like I said, there's the initial layer, and that's an issue. But then it was something that also I think helped me identify those family traumas that I can now also take to my family and say, okay, I don't know that I would have had the understanding had I not gotten to that point or that crossroad where I knew it was enough of an issue to seek help. And that really, I think, opened up the door for healing for me for the next generation.
Now, do you think, had you not found yoga, and had the ability to decompress and unconsciously, to a certain extent, release some of this trauma and ease some of the pressure on the doors that you are shutting, the compartmentalization. Do you think that is what allowed you to get to a point to then go and look at the bulimia and actually say, I want therapy for myself? Do you think one set up the other?
It was one of the catalysts. I think I
Yeah.
also got to a point that I hit a low point in life,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to a point where I think, like I said, the downside of being or having the access that I did based on who I was around, it was very sterile, and there wasn't a lot of depth, and there wasn't a lot of people that really and truly cared for you. And
Right.
I had some interactions with people that I considered to be very close friends that helped me realize or understand that they could have cared less about what happened to me. And got to this point of realizing that I was very much alone in a time where I had more people around me than I ever thought
Mm-hmm.
could or would or should. And it was glamorous, and it was all these things that we think we're supposed to strive to in life. And it was one of the loneliest, darkest moments. And I think those moments with yoga and having those pockets of just honesty and
Yep.
being forced to kind of look at myself mixed with some of the lowest points and those moments that are supposed to be glamorized that are just ugly and
Yeah.
dark and disgusting kind of all melding into one place was really that, okay, like I can't keep doing this anymore. Like I am depressed, I am a lot of different things, and it is either I pick myself up and push forward and go into kind of like survivor mode again and fix it, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to keep going very well for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be here much longer.
Yeah. And I mean, it's tough. It's a tough reality, but I think more people experience that than less people.
Mhm.
And most people, it seems to me, looking around the world and watching people and or talking to people, and they explode long before they ever get help or ask for help. And one of the things that struck me is, through all the years, most of the people that could have helped me didn't,
Mhm.
because they weren't worried about me. And several of them told me, "Oh, you're gonna be fine. You're so smart. You got the looks. You've got the talent. Like you're gonna be great. You're gonna be fine." I'm like, "Well, if you're fucking worried about me, maybe I actually would have gotten where you think I'm gonna
Yep.
end up."
Yep.
And it's shocking how little most people actually care
Mhm.
what's going on, because they see what they see and they think, oh, they've got it under control.
Mhm.
And like, some things, yeah, that person,
Yeah.
myself, whoever, has under control, but other things, we're human. We can't possibly,
No.
unless you've reached, not that you become a guru, but unless you reach that type of self-realization, like,
Yeah.
the odds are you're not okay. And like, maybe you're okay today, maybe you're getting by, but you could always do better. You could always be better. You could always get help. And survival mode, one of the big things, one of my big kind of messages that I want to amplify is that being in survival mode is not thriving.
No.
And a group of people in survival mode is called a tribe. A
Mhm.
group of people in thrive are called a community. It's like, so if we know what it's like to thrive, or we have an idea of what it's like, or we've experienced it, or we've seen it, then why wouldn't we want to do that more? And why wouldn't we want to be part of a community where everyone's thriving and everyone's helping everyone else thrive, rather than being in a tribe where you're forced by some other group to survive?
Mhm.
Like, and not that those tribes can't become communities, they can,
Right.
but other communities become tribes as soon as they try to force another community out of existence. And it's like, that's the problem. Like, we're all just trying to survive. Let's help each other. We got this far through helping each other. We're only going to get to the next place by helping each other.
It is a wild thing that it's funny, for as many beautiful things that have come out of the last couple of years. There's a lot of things that I thought we were way past, that you look at now and you're just like, Jesus, how am I supposed to navigate whatever this is?
And I don't know, like, this gets a little esoteric, but I think we live in a reality where you can have someone that reaches a level where they can walk among the animals and not be killed, and you can call that nature, you can call that inner city, you can call it whatever you want to call it, because going out into the middle of nowhere and knowing how not to get yourself mauled by a bear or a cougar it's no different than going into a inner city dangerous place, regardless of what the population there, because they're all in survival mode, same as out in the wilderness. And like, there are people that have learned how to transcend and communicate and present themselves so that they do not get eaten. And then you have other people that are walking around scared, and they look like that little mouse or that little squirrel that any second is going to get attacked. And most likely, very few animals in nature die peaceful deaths. And we seem to just want to replicate that in our human culture. It's like, is that a good idea?
I think too, I mean, social media as a whole, I think, has shifted our understanding of what people deem as okay. And I remember at some of the lowest points, oh my gosh, at the lowest points in my life, I remember people like, oh my gosh, you look so happy. So I just like assume you're always happy all the time. Or like, to this day, I will never comment on someone's weight, because I remember at the times where I was the worst off health-wise. God, you look so great. You're so thin. I was just like, yeah, but I'm throwing up every 5 seconds in the bathroom to attain this. And you're here, I mean, giving me positive feedback on something that is being done or being, attained in a very negative way. And so social media is just another layer of that now, where we're seeing these people in this not real space and attributing it to success or something we want to strive for. And
it's such a catch-22 as well, because your knee-jerk reaction, I don't know, maybe it's just my age because I'm in my mid-40s, but like, my knee-jerk reaction, guy or girl, is like, oh, you look great. And I'm like, can I say that? And sometimes I just say it and I'm like, well, whatever.
Just let it. I've got to a point where I think I'm done with political correctness to some degree. And like, at some point, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But I think too, that there's layers of being able to do it. And I think that there's a difference between saying you look great and looking at someone and being like, God, you're so thin. I strive to see thinness as as something that's looked at as desirable, or like the peak, of whatever that is, beauty and, social standards. And those are the different.
Yes, 100%. And there's one other thing, when I was thinking, you said, political correctness, and I'm so sick of it as well. I think the thing that I hope for is that if I say you look great, I hope the person is comfortable enough to say, oh, good, because I feel like shit. Because then it can have, we can have a real dialogue.
Conversation. It's that, hey, how are you? I'm good.
Yeah. Are you though? Are you really?
Yep.
And, I do try to do this in my life. I don't always have the bandwidth for it, and I don't always want to put this on people, but I do try to, like, someone says, oh, how you doing? I'm like, not bad. Like, it's been an up and down day. I try to have some, if I feel great, then, I'll say great, or if I've had a shitty day, it's like, it's been a rough morning, but it's starting to turn around. So, here's to it.
Mhm.
Because I like, that's kind of the world I want to live in, so it's like I've got to put it out there and see how people respond and hope
Mhm.
that they also respond. Because I had a meeting this morning, and we're looking at for the group that I'm working with, and we're looking at the sales number, and it's like, why are no neighbors getting the same service?
Mhm.
And it's like, are they not talking to each other? Do they not like each other? Are we not doing our job? Like, why
Right.
are neighbors not, you know, why are they not both getting this? And like, the guy running the meeting was kind of under the impression that this is our fault,
Mhm.
as the representatives. And I'm just thinking, like, I don't know, is it? Like, is it really? Like, is this not like a sign of the times that neighbors do not talk to each other?
Oh.
And we have forgotten what community is, and
Mhm.
that we all, get lifted by this invisible force of smiling and what can I do for you? And I feel like shit, but I don't want you to have a bad day because I'm having a bad day. Like,
Right.
what if we actually said that?
Yep.
And then they're going to have an even better day because they just helped us have a better day than we were having, and
Yep.
then they're like, wow, look what I did for my neighbor.
Yeah.
It's like everyone feels good when they do something for someone.
You do.
So
You do.
I know you're pressed for time, and I know we could go on. So we'll let's wrap it up here, I think.
Yeah.
And we can maybe do a round two. At one point
Absolutely.
in time, I want to get couples on together. So at some point
Yeah.
in time, I want to do you and Scott at the same
Would
time
love
and
that.
have an episode.
Mhm.
So I don't know how far in the future that is, but we'll figure that out down the road. Is there
Great.
anything that you've got going on social media? Are you doing anything, promoting anything?
I
Like,
have a social media account. I'm in the Charlotte area now. And so I teach dance on occasion to people from Charlotte specifically.
okay,
I am doing it for advanced adults who are serious about actually being in the industry. And you will
oh,
get
cool.
very, very honest feedback from me.
That'd be
I
helpful.
don't sugarcoat it. I don't teach to a lower level. I definitely will give you exactly what you're getting in the industry. So if you're in the Charlotte area, if that's something that you want, if it's just like, hey, I have had a day and dance is my outlet,
Yeah,
it's something that I think for me, being able to be in an area where there isn't that kind of scene,
yeah,
I've actually found my community here in moving somewhere new and getting to meet new people. And I think my closest friends that I've made here are from that community. And being able to say for those who actually have aspirations of leaving, as you know, I know you in Wilmington talked about, hey, I can't do
yeah,
this here. What that actually looks like, what the hardships are.
yeah.
So yeah, if anyone's in here, I post that every so often on social media.
Cool.
So they can follow me at ashley.allen. And
I'll make sure to put that in the show notes.
yeah, if you're ever in Charlotte, come take a class.
Yeah, cool.
Mhm.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Don't
Thanks.
forget to leave a comment or a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. New episodes every Tuesday, and check us out on YouTube for short clips from each episode. Thank you. And until next time, remember, your life story is yours to write and rewrite as many times as you want.